Hustleburg. This podcast is all about small business in St. Petersburg, Florida, how the business owners got started, how they built their business, and how they serve our community. I'm Brett Bittner, and I'm the host of Hustleburg, and I started Beyond Your Side Hustle, a marketing firm where we help budding entrepreneurs go beyond their side hustles and ditch their 9-to-5s. As the founder of a small business here in St. Pete myself, I love meeting and talking with fellow small business owners. Lucky for you, I also like to record those conversations for you to listen to. If you find anything of value in this episode, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, because there are probably more nuggets in other episodes, both past and upcoming. It would also be great if you rate and review the episode to let us know what you got out of the conversation. If you have a question about marketing, building your brand, or operating your small business that you'd like to have answered on a Q&A episode, please visit beyondyoursidehustle.com/podcast question to submit it. In this episode, I interviewed Jenna Elwart of Dr. Jenna Elwart Associates, PLLC. You may remember Dr. Elwart from the St. Pete Open for Business chats, where she talked about how her practice utilized teletherapy to continue seeing patients in the midst of the COVID-19 safer-at-home orders. Today, we have a longer conversation about her practice and how she built it. Now, on to the episode. Enjoy! So, why clinical psychology? What is it that appealed to you about what it is that you do?
Well, in all honesty, I went into it a little bit naive, not exactly knowing what clinical psychology exactly was. I knew that from an early age, I knew I wanted to help others. When I was in undergrad, I actually was a pre-med major, and with the intention of going to medical school, and I thought maybe going into psychiatry. And then I did a lot of soul searching and realized that that didn't feel like it was truly authentically me doing the medical side of it. So then I kind of dabbled in, took some psychology courses, realized that this was it. I knew from the first psychology class that I took that this was authentically my path for helping others. Then when you have a bachelor's degree in psychology, there's really not much that you can do with it. I mean, there are things, but it wasn't going to allow me to do to the extent that I wanted to do of helping others. So I naturally went to graduate school, and that's where I kind of went into it a little bit naively, because there are different areas of focus in psychology. There's some different degrees that, doctorates that you can get, such as counseling psychology or school psychology. And then, a very common one is clinical psychology. The reason I say I kind of went into it naively is because a major part of clinical psychology is really focused on assessment, psychological assessment, and diagnosing, as well as then the treatment of the, as a result of the diagnosing. And so the first couple of years of my graduate program, really the first semester, I was kind of like, why are we doing all these assessment classes? I just want to do therapy. Then I came to understand the full extent of what clinical psychology allows, with that focus on assessment. I'm very grateful that I landed where I did, because the assessment piece is very relevant, very necessary, gives us clarity into what people are experiencing, gives me a framework for, even if I haven't done a psychological assessment on a client, then I still have that foundation of knowing kind of the symptomology and kind of all the different pieces of who this person is. So that's kind of how I landed into clinical psychology, with the passion to help others, but then also this is, the path to clinical psychology was just kind of naively entered into.
Understood. So you're motivated to help others, and you're working in an aspect of psychology. Now, I understand that you might be in a subset with your focus, holistic well-being and mindfulness. How does that work into what it is that you offer to patients?
Yeah. So again, kind of, I really see two parts to my job. There's the assessment piece, and then there is the therapy piece. And as a licensed psychologist, I do both. And so the assessment piece, I do really the most common person that comes in for a testing is what we call a psychoeducational testing. That's for usually children and adolescents who either their teachers or parents or someone else has identified that they're struggling in school and that they may have a learning disability or there may be ADHD or both. And so we do a full psychological evaluation where we test the intelligence, we test academic achievement, we test emotional functioning, we measure behavioral functioning, and then that results in a report that then also results in a diagnosis if a diagnosis is warranted, if the data supports that, and then probably the most important thing that comes from the report is then recommendations for accommodations based on whatever the diagnosis is. That side of the work that I do is um, pretty much done at that point. I don't really see the client after that. Then the other side of my work is therapy. And so this is where kind of that mindfulness word comes in, that a lot of the approach that I take with people is teaching them mindfulness techniques, because research shows us that the mindfulness techniques really helps really across the board with all different types of diagnoses. And so then, the holistic, where I name myself as kind of a holistically minded, is that I'm looking at the whole person, right? Whoever is sitting across from me, I'm thinking about where do they come from? The family that they grew up in. I'm thinking about their the experiences that they've had. I'm thinking about their resources that they have available to them, their coping strategies that they have, and so much more, right? So I'm not looking at just one part of the person. I'm not looking at just the physical body and what may be ailing them. I'm looking at the whole person and how it all interconnects, all the different pieces interconnect.
So this is something then is this something that's common when it comes to people who are looking for psychotherapy?
It's becoming more and more common. The mindfulness part of treatment is a fairly newer incorporation into the different treatment modalities, but it is certainly, because of its effectiveness, is certainly being utilized more and more.
Now, this is not something that you just kind of fall into. There's a definite path when it comes to education and certifications. So we're talking high school, undergrad, grad school, and doctorate. Is there anything that I'm missing in between when it comes to education to end up in the position where you are?
No, I mean, that's once you reach the doctorate level, that's as far as formal education, that's as far as it goes. However, every 2 years we have to renew our license. Depending on what state you're licensed in, they have different requirements. In the state of Florida, we have to complete 40 continuing education units within the 2 years that you have to be relicensed. So there's constant learning and constant educating. But once you reach having the doctorate degree, formal education does stop.
Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier, before we got into the interview and some of the conversations that we've had, is as someone offering a professional service, most of your education isn't necessarily on the business side of things. So I'd like to ask, what is the most important lesson that you've learned now that you have an operating practice or in the startup leading to the situation where you are operating a practice?
Yeah, this is actually a great question, because you are correct that the education and the training that I received, before I was launched into practicing this profession, um, included zero business classes or education. We had a seminar here or there on someone who currently owned a private practice and gave us, a 2-hour snippet of what they did. But oh my goodness, when I stepped into this, I worked for a couple organizations before I moved into private practice, which was my ultimate goal, was to land into private practice. But you ask what's the most important thing. I don't know that there's a most important thing. I think there was so much for me to learn. And I think this is where a lot of clinicians, they don't open up their own private practice because, number one, it's scary because we have no idea. We're not trained in it. We're not business people. And number two, it's a whole nother set of skills. So as a clinician, I show up, I work with my clients, I write my progress notes, and I go home. As a business owner, there's so much more to it. And so for me, I guess the most important thing that I learned, was to be patient with myself, and because there was a lot to learn. I did a lot of trial and error. I will also say I still have some incredible mentors who they shared with me their own successes and how they got there, as well as their failures, and so what not to do. I tend to be someone who needs to learn through my own experiences and not just take people's word for it. So I had my own, successes, and I had my own failures, right? So things like how to market myself, how to how to pay taxes. I mean, these were all things that, like, how to get a business name, how to, all of these things were completely foreign to me. And so there was a lot of reading, researching, talking to other people who have successful practices. What are they doing? How are they structuring it? How to write a business plan. There was just, all sorts of aspects to it. The first 2 years of my practice, was the most stressful for me. I actually moved into I was pretty successful right away in getting clients. But the first 2 years was incredibly stressful because I just had no idea what I was doing. I was learning as I went along.
Yeah, as somebody who went to, I majored in business in college. We didn't see too many social science folks on the north end of campus
Right.
at the University of Georgia. And so I know that a lot of the things that you just mentioned that are old hat to me and are things that I've probably worked on and known for almost 20 years now are things that I imagine never even came to mind when you were in undergrad, grad school, and into the doctorate. So you are having to do that very trial and error kind of feel, which ironically is fairly entrepreneurial because there are a lot of things where we are trying things and figuring out if they work or if they don't for our business.
Right. Yes.
So what is it that you're doing to help make sure that you have a full calendar of patients in your business?
Well, so one aspect that's really helped me is, I guess let me back up a little bit. When I first established this, I did have, one of my mentors highly suggested to me that I write a mission statement for my practice, and that has been that is, kind of maybe that's the most important thing I learned from this process, because I keep coming back to that. And my mission statement for my practice is to provide quality care to all people. Now, that may seem a little lofty. However, that's where I keep coming back to it. And it's what sets me straight when I start to kind of think of going off in a certain direction that it won't provide quality services to all people. And what I mean by that is, so, I I am one provider. I'm a psychologist who takes insurance. I take 3 different insurances, so I'm not on a lot of panels of insurance. But for a private practice, taking any insurance is a huge feat. So I had to learn the language of insurance from the provider side of things, and that, however, it brings me back to my mission statement, where people who otherwise would not be able to pay for my services out of pocket are able to utilize their insurance plans if they have mental health coverage. That then has filled my schedule. That's how I was actually able to um, start off pretty quickly with a fairly full caseload, because there's not a lot of psychologists who do take insurance, which, to be honest, I understand. I get it. This is
Mhm.
not a judgment on my part at all. And that's what I meant by if I ever try to stray from my mission statement, because there are times I am tempted to walk away from being an insurance provider. But I come back to the client, right? If there are people who cannot afford these services without using their insurance, how are they going to get these services? So that's what
Right.
keeps me, taking it. But it's also an instant referral base, right? So that keeps me busy. And then also, I have really just built up a reputation in the community. At least, I've gotten some feedback from some of my colleagues, that I tend to take on clients who other clinicians may not be as willing to work with. Some of the higher risk individuals, meaning people who may engage in some self harm, or if they have some suicidal thoughts. Those things as a clinician can be pretty scary to bring into your practice. But I'm very comfortable with the higher risk populations, and so I get a lot of referrals from people, from other clinicians, for that. And then the other piece is I have kind of another part of my practice where I have graduate students. We call them the graduate associates. They are students who are from the program that I graduated from, who are working towards their doctorate in psychology, and they need to get a year of practicum experience, either in diagnostic or therapy, depending on where they are in their program. And I am considered a site for those practicum experiences. And with those, I can offer the services that they provide. I charge very low amounts for people who are have lower financial resources. And so I've also gained that kind of reputation in the community, that for people who can't normally, they don't have health insurance, or they just don't have the resources to be able to pay for services. They understand that they're working with a graduate student, and that person is only here for a certain amount of time, and then a new person comes in. So there is kind of a con that comes along with it. But that is another way that I've been able to have people coming through the door. And then the other way, is I have other clinicians who I share office space with, and then I have other associates who work with me, some independent contractors who work with me, and we all refer to one another. There's a psychiatrist, Dr. Tamarkin, who is in my office. We share space, and so her and I, although we're both in the mental health field, our services are somewhat different, and so we refer to one another, and so that's a referral base as well. And then just networking with other psychiatrists and other psychologists and other mental health counselors. You just kind of start to get to know people and know what their areas of expertise are, and you kind of refer accordingly.
Now, when you aren't working with your patients or on building your practice, what is one of your favorite things to do in or around St. Pete?
Oh goodness, I there's so much to pick from. I have 2 young boys, and so we love going to the beach. So that is one of our favorite things to do. The other thing that I actually, about 10 years ago, moved out of St. Pete. I live on the outskirts of St. Pete in Seminole. And I will say that we will still drive into downtown St. Pete because I love just the downtown feel. I love the restaurants. So we try to do that as often as we can. Currently, obviously we're not doing so much of that, but that's one of our favorites too, is to even just be walking downtown. It's such a great energy about it. And so that's something that I do enjoy.
Now, do you have any upcoming events here in 2020 or into next year where people could find you that you'd like to have listeners to make sure they put on their calendars?
Well, as far as events, not right now, because we're in just kind of an odd time with the whole lockdown and just kind of watching what happens. So as of right now, we don't have anything planned. However, I am at my office, and people can contact us, and if they are in need of services, and if not me, then I have my associates who are also available, and we're here and we're ready to help.
Fantastic. Well, the last little bit, will you let people know where they can find out more about, we'll go ahead and give the exact name, Dr. Jenna Elwart and Associates, PLLC, to find out more about the practice, things like the website, social media, and the like.
Yes. So my website is drjennaelwart.com. So that is drjennaelwart.com. And then you can also find us on Facebook if you look up Dr. Jenna Elwart and Associates. And then finally, you can also look at us on Instagram, and that's a little bit different. The name of that is Therapy for Authenticity.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Elwart, very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
You did it. You've just listened to Hustleburg. To thank you for listening, I have a free guide to help you get started marketing your business online, aptly named our Getting Started Guide, available at beyondyoursidehustle.com/gettheguide. See how to begin with the first 3 things you should be doing for your business online. Speaking of businesses, if you're a small business owner in St. Pete and you'd like to be a guest on an episode of the podcast, let us know at beyondyoursidehustle.com/podcast-guest. If you got something of value from this podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast player. This is something small you can do to help us shine the spotlight on all the great businesses St. Pete has to offer. The music in this episode is Defining Your Dreams by my friend Rhymer Educator. On May 28th, he released a mixtape entitled Quentin Quarantino about loneliness during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I encourage you to check it out on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you listen to great music. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to sharing with you how we do business in the Burg.